on This Week in Radio Tech, where, well, I'm live in the Smoky Mountains talking about the end of 2017 and what's coming up in 2018, especially in virtual radio. Chris Tobin is joining me as well, and I'm going to try to keep the fire going on This Week in Radio Tech. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcast Supply Worldwide, where it's Christmas for the caster. Save up to 61% whether you're a broadcaster, podcaster, voicecaster, or everything caster at BSW. By the new Omnia Bolt audio processor, more processing power in one RU than others give you in 3. And by the new Ruby console from Lavo, with AutoMix smart mixing and a context-sensitive user interface. See Lavo in your future at lavo.com/TWiRT. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host, and I'm just delighted to be here with you. This is the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower and all the digital and some of the old analog stuff in between. And you've tuned into our last show of 2017 in Radio Tech. It happens to be our 377th episode. Now, I'm not in my usual studio. I'm at a cabin in East Tennessee, just enjoying the last few days of the year. The family has gone antiquing and left me alone with the Christmas tree and the fireplace. So we'll see if we can have some fireside chat. By the way, I don't have the safety screen in front of the fireplace. So if you see me with my hair on fire or the back of my shirt on fire, you'll know why. Because the screen is kind of big. There's not room for me. There's not room for my booty and the screen on the same hearth. It's just not going to work. But I thought aesthetics, are more important than safety. So there we go. So anyway, Merry Christmas from the mountains of East Tennessee, the edge of the Smoky Mountains. Just outside my window, I can see the 4th highest peak in the eastern United States, and I can't see the Appalachian Trail, but I can see where it goes because it's on this side of Mount Goyo. Which is just a few miles distant outside the window. So it's a very idyllic, beautiful spot to see. We do have a live webcam here. It's on YouTube all the time, and just for fun, I'll put that in the show notes. So if you're interested in seeing my view out the window, you can as well. Although if you click the link at night, it's just going to be dark. That's about it. But during sunrises are glorious and sunsets look pretty good too. All right, enough out of me on our last episode. Let's bring in my faithful, loyal, and amazing co-host, Chris Tobin. Hey, Chris. Good afternoon. How are you?
Hello, Kirk. I'm doing well, and I do not have a scenic backdrop as you do. Sorry, it's just a bland voice booth. But that's the way it goes. The year-end show would be something simple for the new year.
Well, good. And you're probably in Newark, is that right?
Yep. We're in the studios. We're actually, this weekend is our last pledge drive for the year. 3 days of pledging to help close out the financial budgets and keep things in order. As a public broadcaster, you're reliant on many sources of income, and a good percentage of it comes from our listeners. So that's what we're doing these next 3 days.
Being the kind of guy I am, I think that's really good. If you are a public radio listener, you really should give to your public radio station. I mean, you're enjoying it, and the stuff ain't free. It costs money to keep everything going, to provide the kind of programming that you get with public radio. And you don't hear commercials, short underwriting announcements. But if you enjoy public radio, by golly, pay for it at least a little bit. Every little bit does help. So, and hey, you might get a free tote bag, free tickets to a concert or something like that. Hey, Chris, so you're at, and we don't often mention your call letters. I don't know if that's by design or not, but WBGO is the station that you tend to be at day in and day out, right?
Yes, it's the all jazz station, 24 hours. It's been that way, full-time jazz since 1978. So there are many jazz stations in the United States, yes, but only, I think, last check with the programming folks, I think there are 4 in the country that are actually full-time. The rest are all part-time jazz and other music sources. So, and we do a lot with NPR Music, as well as their jazz group. And we have a lot of folks on staff that are jazz aficionados, literally musicians, to knowing almost everybody in the business. So it's a lot of fun. We do a lot of great stuff.
So I don't remember if it was this past Monday night, which is Christmas Day night, or if it was Tuesday morning, the day after Christmas, when we were packing up to come to the cabin. But I told she who shall not be named, the Amazon Echo, I told my Amazon Echo to play WBGO, and she did. And I don't know what the show was, but it was some gut bucket blues, baby. I mean, it was some, oh, I done fell down in the grave and my girlfriend, my ex is kicking the dirt on me kind of blues. What show was that? Do you know?
Yes. That's our daily show. It's the Blues Show. It's with Michael Bourne, who's the host. He's also a theater critic for us as well. Yeah, that's the Blues Hour.
Yeah, I've heard of Michael. Yeah.
Yep. That's what we do, and it is. I mean, it's funny because today, or was it yesterday? I think it was today actually. Somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, what song are we playing right now?" I said, "Oh, Rolling Stones." What? Rolling Stones has a blues song. Yeah, we're playing the Rolling Stones. So it's, you sit there going, wait a minute, this is a jazz station playing the Rolling Stones, but it's Blues Hour. Okay, that fits. And that's the kind of stuff we do. So, that's part of what, when we're asking people to pledge and help us out, these are things we're able to do that most other places wouldn't even, consider. So that's what we do stuff really different, which is fun. And just as you pointed out, it is the true stuff. So when Michael picks out songs and, has this stuff going, it's like, whoa, okay, that's something I haven't heard in a long time, or it's memorable and reminds you of something else you did. So it's cool.
I remember my wife was in the bedroom too. We were packing to go on the trip, and she said, "I've never heard anything quite like that before." I said, "Yeah, that's right. That's some gut bucket blues right there."
But it's the real stuff. That's, it's not something people think is. It's the real, true form. And then Michael will then tell you the backstories to many of the artists he plays because he knows them. He's been with them. And was it Duchess? I think was a group we had in the female singers. They were in recently. We did a recording with them and their music, and he started talking to them about some of the stuff they did in a club in, was it Nashville? Somewhere. And they're like, wait a minute, were you there? You remember that? I was, oh yeah. And it involved bras and kazoos. And I'm like, what? And that's all I can say. But it was the wildest conversation, but it tied into the music and the show. And that's the kind of stuff we do. It's not just playing songs back to back. It's literally, oh, by the way, when Miles did this particular song, it was done at his house, and here's how it went down. And 9 times out of 10, most of the folks here probably were there, so they could witness it and say, yeah, by the way, that did happen. Matter of fact, the other day, our morning guy, Gary Walker, our morning show host, who's very good friends with Stevie Van Zandt, gets a call from Mr. Van Zandt and says, hey, where are you? You're supposed to be with me, blah, blah, blah. We're like, what? They were going to a club. They were going out to play. And he says, you're supposed to be there with me. Here's a guy who loves the music, Stevie Van Zandt, jazz as well as rock and roll. You know his name from many places. And, he's calling up a morning show guy at home going, hey, where the heck are you? You're supposed to be with us. We're all going to have a good time. That's the kind of stuff we do. So that's how we translate to the audience. We know more than just the label itself or the backstory stuff is you can't get anywhere but here.
So on today's show, we're going to be talking about, as Chris kind of alluded to, the ghost of Christmas past, or the technology of Christmas future. Actually, Chris, before the show, you said that in a really eloquent way that I'm not doing a very good job of duplicating. What, in your mind, what's today's topic?
I think technology is a future, past, present, and future. The technologies have gone, they're here, and who knows what they'll be in the future. That's basically it. You were talking about your headset and what you had, and I was just talking about the Yule log behind you in the tree and things of that sort. And it's like, oh, maybe we'll be visited by somebody. The technology, the ghost of past. And when you think about these things, there's a lot of stuff that we forget about that we still use or are influenced by, and then the future can usually be a result of what we're doing now.
Well, good. Well, we're going to talk about that. And we talked a little bit about future stuff on some previous shows. There's a chance that Chris Tarr, our former co-host and sometimes a special guest on the show, there's a chance that Chris Tarr will be able to join us. And Chris is, since he's been he's been part of Entercom and now part of that Entercom and CBS merger. He has a few interesting ideas as well that if he makes it on, I know he was scrambling to get back to his home through ice and snow in Mukwonago, Wisconsin. So we'll see if we can hear from Chris. One thing I'm a little bit curious about, and we'll get to it right after our first commercial, but I want to tease it a bit, and that is that so often when we hear blues music, we hear it through a very distorted sound of the recording. Either we're miking a speaker that is just horribly distorted. I can't tell you how many times I have been on Beale Street in Memphis when I used to live there. And there'd be a single performer playing harmonica. He'd play some harmonica, then he'd sing, then he'd play some more harmonica, or he would have a guitar, an electric guitar, and it was amplified, of course, and it was horribly distorted, I guess on purpose. And then even his harmonica blowing in the mic was distorted, and his singing voice was distorted. Now, how much of this is style and how much of this is I can't afford an actual amplifier and speaker? So I'd like to understand a little bit about that, since you've been involved with recording blues and jazz artists, if this is actually supposed to be a style, or if it's a circumstance of I don't have any money, just like my songs say. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, is brought to you by our friends at Broadcast Supply Worldwide, where it is Christmas for the caster at BSW. Their website, you need to remember this, just memorize it, man, BSWUSA.com, BSWUSA.com for Broadcast Supply Worldwide. If you go there for the next couple of days, they're still having Christmas for the caster, where you can save up to 61%, whether you're a broadcaster, a podcaster, a voice caster, or whatever caster. You can take advantage of the lowest prices of the year of 2017 on a wide range of gear. They really want to blow this stuff out and make you a better broadcaster at the same time. They're having a broadcast mic bonanza, and as part of that, the MXL BCD1 dynamic mic. Now, it delivers a really warm and rich sound, and you get the most out of any voice. It's bundled with a companion desktop mic stand with a convenient built-in 12-foot XLR cable. It's built into the stand, not into the mic. And it's only $159 for a limited time. That is a heck of a deal. MXL is well known for microphones, of medium to high quality. So check that out. That's 54% off. You can save on a big price drop on the Henry Super Relay 2. Now, you know where these are useful is when you are installing a console that's not a broadcast console, but it's maybe something from Behringer or Mackie or some other console that doesn't have a relay closure on it. Or even if you do have a relay closure, you have just one relay closure on your broadcast style console, and you don't want to run 110 volts through it. I mean, you can't. Well, let's say, for example, that you have a console from one of our other sponsors like Axia. You get a collector to ground for the GPO, for the general purpose output. Well, you need to run the Henry Super Relay with that, and you can control 110 volt tally, on air light outside your studio. You can make that flash that's built in the Henry Super Relay 2. Plus, it gives you 6 more single pole double throw contacts, if I recall right. I hope that's right. I've installed several of the Henry Super Relay 2s, and they're terrific. For a limited time, it's $259, and it's really well built. I mean, you're never going to have to service this thing. It's going to sit under a console for the next 20 years, and I don't think you'll ever have to deal with it. Or you can get a deal on the same headset that I'm wearing, the Audio-Technica BPHS-1, where you get 3 headsets for the price of 2. Just buy 2, and they'll ship you 3. Now, be sure you ask them for 3, but they'll ship you 3. And the cool thing about these is they already have the connectors soldered on, and that's what you need. Most everybody needs the 1/4-inch tip ring sleeve for the headphones and the XLR for the microphone. If you need something else, okay, sure, you use your cutters, cut them off, and put what you need on there. But I mean, I just plug all mine in; they work fine. Plus, they also have this Tascam US32 or US42 Mini Studio. That's on sale. Just enter promo code US10 at checkout, and you can save up to 45% on these little podcast, little mixing console. They do several things. I got to play with one at a podcast convention, and they're really cool. Finally, okay, the last thing I want to tell you about is the DBX 286S vocal processor. Now, it's a mic preamp, high quality, low noise mic preamp from DBX. And it has 4 stages of mic processing in it. It is just amazing. I use it at my own studio at home, and I just love it. Really awesome mic processor and mic preamp, and I love it. Since I've been using that, I have to spend a lot less time editing out things like breaths from the things that I record, because the downward expander just works so well. So BSWUSA.com, and if you order before 7 p.m. Eastern time, they can ship it the same day. Then you can have most everything they have. You can have overnight if you want to pay for overnight shipping. All right. Thanks a lot to BSW for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Really appreciate you. All right, Chris, my question about distorted audio on blues recordings. Do you have any say about that? Is Chris there? Muted?
There we go. Yep. Some of it is intentional. Okay. Some of it is just the style. I mean, the style intentionally done that way. Whether it's because they can or cannot afford a good amplifier isn't always the case. I know when I've traveled through parts of the South over the years that I've come across some places where the music is going, and yes, it sounded distorted, but it was actually intentional. A friend of mine who enjoys playing harmonica, using the bullet mic, the little guy, it's a shape, shape of a bullet. Yeah, you use that in your hand, you cup it in, and on certain songs that he's playing, he distorts intentionally, and others he does not. So it's probably a little bit of both. I don't think it's because they can't afford it. It's just that's the style. And we do have, matter of fact, I think we were playing it today because someone called me and said, "I think your station's distorted." I'm like, no, it's fine. It's the source material is intentional. So, yeah, I'm going to go with when I've heard stuff performed, some of it's distorted, but that is intentional. So that's how it works.
Okay. Well, on Beale Street, I'm pretty sure you do have musicians there who really can't afford anything else except a battery-powered, little speaker box, and everything's distorted, even their vocals. And I think that's because that's what they think it's supposed to sound like. But it's good to know that, at least from a professional recording point of view, it is an artistic element involved.
Yes, I mean there are a lot of times, a lot of musicians, the folks hear that and think that everything should be distorted, so they distort their vocal as well when it's not meant to be. But yeah, there are some that it's intentional, others that it shouldn't be.
I was just a little tiny sidebar here. My wife and I were talking today, and we drove by some little old shack houses here in East Tennessee, and they had aluminum foil up in the window, covering the window on the south facing or the west facing windows. And she said, "I got to tell you, when I was 19 years old," she said, and newly married, my first husband, and she said that when we moved into our little apartment, I saw everybody else had foil on their windows, so I put foil on my windows, not really knowing why. I thought it was the decorative thing to do. And then I had blinds inside the house, and I think I had curtains too. And so then she found out that people who put foil on the windows do that because they can't afford blinds. And the foil, if you got a house, if you live in a trailer in Arkansas with the sun beating down on you, well, guess what? The foil really does help keep the heat out during the summer. But she did it because, she thought it was decorative.
Nice.
You don't have a lot of that in
that's what happens. Keep up with the Joneses.
in New York.
Yeah. Not foil. No.
All right.
Sometimes you walk the streets, you see things in windows that are not really something you want to look at. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll leave it there. All right. Let's talk about this future of broadcasting. We've talked a number of times about this notion of virtualization, and I got to believe, Chris, that to a very large extent, virtualization in its many forms is where we are headed to. And I think we're going to see a whole lot more of it. I got to believe that the huge broadcasters like the iHearts and the Cumuluses and maybe others eventually are going to get to a point where they have mass distribution out of a single place. Now, that doesn't mean they can't do local cut-ins and local stuff. I think they will fully be able to do that. I think they know they'd be foolish to not have a local element. And I think that, hey, smaller, well, a lot of broadcasters, both small, medium, and large, do very well with selling their local content. So I don't think you'll see that go away. You may not even see it change much at all. And I would give you an example, like BBC in England, where they have, in a sense, they have virtualized the equipment at the studio, because a lot of it's no longer at the studio. A lot of it is in London or I want to say Birmingham, England, and in data centers. So they still have surfaces, but behind the surface, it's all back in data centers, well off site. So I think we're going to see a progression. We're going to see a lot of tablets and touch screens replacing surfaces, but we'll also see a lot of surfaces that have all their electronics or their audio I/O or their automation or whatever end up being virtualized off-site. Chris, I'd kind of like to hear your thoughts on this subject and how you see some progression in this world.
Well, virtualization, I totally appreciate and understand the need for it and the way it works and functions and the best way to apply it. But my worry is I'm more concerned now watching, in the case of the large broadcast groups who are consolidating or panicking and trying to figure out how to do the silver bullet across all of their markets with one source. And virtualization is definitely a solution for that. my concern is that the focus of the business model is going to be lost. Yes, you can virtualize. Yes, you could do the BBC model. Yes, you could do what maybe other broadcast groups are doing here in the States, where you have 2 or 3 studios or hubs across the country and feeding out to all their stations in the group. The thing to remember is, in order for the business to work, in the case of radio, and television's the same, but we'll talk about radio, you need to have a component that the people that you're serving or you're reaching can connect with. And I believe virtualization, if you use it just as a stopgap measure for expenses, and that's what I keep hearing from everybody, we're going to virtualize in order to save money. It's like, yeah, okay. So are you saving money and reinvesting it so that you're making a connection with the audience that's generating the revenue for you? Or are you just not paying attention and think that national ad buys are the only way to go? And that's my fear, that the virtualization will be missed. They'll miss out on what you could really be doing with it. As an example, as you pointed out, with tablets or surfaces, a point of sale surface, a touch screen. I could see, if I was a creative broadcaster, programmer, if I had an infrastructure where I could go anywhere on location, connect back to the studio, and now create a local appearance in a local facility, a local place, and serve the audience and have some fun with it. That merchant now has an audience coming to them from my efforts. I have an audience being heard and seen and listened to from a location that's not in the traditional studio. But the infrastructure, the technology lets me now do this. Take for instance the Lavo, right? The Lavo product, you could easily be on location somewhere, say a beach house, doing a summer weekend getaway, having a complete broadcast with your announcers on site. And the only thing they need maybe is a laptop or a tablet, just to make sure they can integrate the microphones and stuff and do things. Back at the studio, bunch of file servers sitting in a rack, and off they goes to both to your stream and to your transmitters. But now you've enhanced your programming, which means you've enhanced your business model, which means you've enhanced your revenue opportunities. If you don't look at it that way and just think of virtualization as just a solution to what you think is a major problem, which is expenses running your radio station, then you will probably wind up in debt or just completely close shop, because that's not going to work out.
So I keep saying over and over that there are so many ways to virtualize the things that you can virtualize. And one example, for example, is this show itself is somewhat virtualized. I mean, okay, look, some years ago, you and I would have to show up at the same studio, or we would have to rent a very expensive Vivix type of connection between TV studios, right? And the show wouldn't be produced at a fairly modest facility in Queens, New York. It would be produced at a much more expensive facility, perhaps hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million or more dollars type of facility. And yet this show and a number of other shows and lots of podcasts are produced in what we would think of as fairly modest facilities. And this show is even produced by a guy, our producer is not even in that studio. He's elsewhere. And that, to me, is absolutely amazing, that he has enough remote control capability to be able to do all that. We coordinate things just fine. Once in a while we have technical issues, and I don't think those would be solved any more quickly if he was right there in front of the actual equipment. So that is a form of virtualization. And in fact, I wanted to bring Suncast into the show and for just a moment, if he's standing by. Suncast, are you still online with us?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Hey, welcome in. Glad you're here. We don't have a camera on you, I suppose, but you could do a wide shot of me and Chris. I wonder if you, Suncast, might just speak for a minute about the virtualization that you do. And I'm sorry, I forgot whatever else we were going to chat about. We agreed to before the show started.
Is there anything in particular you wanted me to discuss, or just in general?
Well, just in general, the idea of virtualization. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I was just saying, Suncast, just walk through for those in the audience, both watching and listening, think of it as like line drawing, from start to finish. Your connection to GFQ Master Control, and my connection into Master Control, Kirk, our guests, and whatever else we do, to demonstrate that with the technology, the virtualization, we'll call it, allows us more flexibility and creativity. And if you could do that, just explain. You don't have to go great detail, but just, broad strokes, just how we're all connected right now.
Right. So the main studio is in Queens, New York, and there's several PCs there that run everything. And my source of connection really is through a software called TeamViewer, and that provides us with the best connection and the easiest connection that we can find right now. I mean, that's something I can do from my PC, and I can also do that from my phone if I'm out and about and I need, for whatever reason, to connect back to GFQ Studio to do something really quickly. I can do that. So that's one of the reasons why we like TeamViewer. So that's what I'll do is right now I'm TeamViewered into a PC back at the studio in Queens. And on that PC, we're running vMix, which allows us to do both the vMix call that you see Kirk and Chris on right now. And that's using WebRTC. And it works very well for us. And I can control that all through TeamViewer. It's as if I have that computer right in front of me. Yes, it's not there physically, but I have enough control of it that I can actually produce this show. I can switch shots from one shot to the other. I can bring up a 2-shot, and I can run intros and videos and browsers and anything that I need to do to produce a show remotely.
So to the audience, for the audience that is, bear in mind that, yes, there's a lot of complexity. Yes, it is, I know many folks I've worked with over the years that they would look at this and go, okay, the room for error or failure is too great. We can't risk it, can't afford to do it. We're a commercial station and money on the line. But the key is, and Kirk can contest to this as well as Suncast, what we do in the background, though, is we make sure that we know the limitations of what we're doing. So in the case where I'm at right now, it's a no-brainer. I'm in a facility that has bandwidth, and I know what it's doing. Kirk is in a facility that has bandwidth because he controls it. Now, there are times the two of us are in locations where we don't control the bandwidth, but we know the limitations, and we work within it and still put on a broadcast. And that's what I try to explain to folks and say, hey, do not be afraid of virtualization. Do not be afraid of the ability to, how would you say, leverage this IP. But understand that you need to build a foundation that you can rely on and understand your limitations.
That's very well said, Chris. That's very well said. That and speaking of having control or not control, Suncast did an amazing job, and he said he's got some flexibility in how he can work. And he moved into a new house and couldn't get high quality internet for several weeks. And Suncast, didn't you actually end up switching our show, producing our show from a public library, from an internet connection there?
I did it from multiple locations. I've done it from a clubhouse that had 15 down by, I think, 5 up, or barely 5 up, which is about the bare minimum. I also did it from a friend's house, which had really good internet, but a lot of small children, which was not great either. And then I also did it once from the public library.
So I think that points out the kind of flexibility that as broadcasters, and of course, Suncast and Chris and I are doing an audio plus video show. You can also do all the same stuff for audio only, for a radio station only. Of course, a lot of radio stations now are putting video along with their remote broadcasts. So Chris, you've done this many, many dozens of times, and I know a lot of our listeners, a lot of our engineering listeners have done this as well. But maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't gone out on remote or operated a station remotely. Hey, one of our guests who's been on here several times, not lately, but Chuck Kelly from Nautel. He tells of, they put an LPFM, a low power FM station, on the air. I want to say, was it in Bangor, Maine, at the Nautel office there? And they pretty much ran the thing by remote control. And it was he had a word for it, where different people could contribute files and so forth to it. Another example, my own radio stations in Mississippi, we have a Rivendell automation system, and certainly others will do this just as well. And we had an opportunity to interview, I believe it was Taylor Swift, but it was going to be going on in Little Rock, Arkansas. But I think we had given away a ticket. One of our local listeners in Greenville, Mississippi, had the opportunity to go to Little Rock and meet Taylor Swift backstage. And of course, our morning guy and his co-host was there. Anyway, they were able to, instead of doing a live broadcast, which that always may end up having its own a bit more complication. They did something that was almost live, whereas they used a good quality microphone going into an iPhone, and they recorded it using Twisted Wave or some similar software, recorded the interview with the local winner, with Taylor Swift, and got that done. They just, edited the top and tail of it and put it into a Dropbox folder, and literally within less than a minute, it was sitting in a Dropbox folder in Greenville, Mississippi on the automation there. Well, that particular folder is that station's Play Me Next folder. So if there's a file in there, no matter what it is, it's going to get played next. It's not going to interrupt, but it's going to get scheduled the very next thing after the current song. And bam, it went on the air. Sounded so good. And so this, to me, this is a tool that helps local broadcasters stay and sound local. It allowed us to do something that we otherwise would have done over the phone with somebody at the studio and had to coordinate, it's hard to hire good people. Have somebody at the studio to coordinate that, not remembering how to put the phone on the air. And I promise you, it would have been a Charlie Foxtrot. And to have it work as well as it did, and now we do that on a regular basis. We put stuff on the air just by putting, the file we want into that folder. Yeah, it can be dangerous. You might, whoops, uploaded the wrong thing. But for the most part, it's working great. And I think that's the kind of virtualization, if you will, that I'm holding up my fingers in air quotes for those of you not watching. That's the kind of virtualization, to me, that is meaningful and helps broadcasters to do a better job. Chris?
No, that's exactly it. That's spot on. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Because a lot of folks, and this is a problem that we're going to have for a while. IT departments in the broadcast industry, unless they're broadcasters who are now doing IT, look at virtualization for just what it is. Virtualization of office applications, CPU machines, physical plant, not for program generation or content creation and how to better the workflow we currently have. They don't look at it that way. That's why a lot of places that try to do virtualization and then try to do a broadcast workflow crash. They collapse. It just doesn't work. So, any of us, those of us who have done it, we're doing it right now. We've been doing it for how many years now? I've done it recently with a friend of mine with his internet network, and we're doing some stuff there that's like totally breaks the model from tradition, but creates so much revenue opportunity. It's out of control. That broadcasters need to wake up and realize. And we as the engineering or technical people or the bits, the broadcast ITs, need to embrace, understand, and go, okay, here's how you do it. And I still say, and I'm going to continue to evangelize this, I guess, you need to talk the language of the programmer. You need to talk the language of the marketing department. And most of all, you need to talk the language of the general manager / sales manager. And the reason being is if you're going to virtualize your facility, there's a few things you need to do. Some housekeeping. Infrastructure. I was talking to Suncast earlier before the broadcast that we were talking about how I've run into several situations. People call me for advice and can't explain why things are happening in their home studio network. And it turns out that the infrastructure wasn't exactly up to par. The cabling was fine because they tell me, I got this brand new Cat 6 cable. I've got these special connectors. I've got this blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's all well and good. Where does that all go to? A switch? That's good. So what switch is it? How much did you pay for that switch? Guess what? The choke point is your switch. So these are things we as broadcast engineers need to look at in our facilities. Facility I'm in here, even at the home where Kirk is at. If he's going to do business-related stuff or semi, Soho business type stuff, you still need switches that are managed or properly functioning for bandwidth control. So yes, does it cost a few more bucks than the $29 version? Absolutely. But as I always say, you get what you pay for. A friend of mine recently, as recent as 2 days ago, asked for advice on what to do about his home network. I suggested a switch, the brand. He received it, plugged it in, and he was like, I cannot believe the difference in performance of my 12 computers for the business and what we're doing. As all I do is replace the switch. I said, that's correct. And he's like, whoa. So now I've programmed some VLANs because you got some mission critical machines that need to be separate from the regular traffic. And then he ran into the issue of the access point plugged into that switch and couldn't understand what was going wrong. I said, your access point is choking with everybody's connections from their phones. So he went and I told him, here's an access point brand and model you should look at. It's designed to handle maximum of 200 connections. So since your business only has 12 to 15, maybe 20 people at a time, you should be okay. Plugs it in. Oh my goodness, he says, I cannot believe the issue's gone away. So these are things to consider, and then there's the phrase wired speed and Wi-Fi or wireless. If you're in a physical plant, yes, Wi-Fi is convenient, but for certain broadcast applications like video and audio, try and do wired connections when you're in your plant and use the Wi-Fi as a control source. Maybe use your phone to control the device that's wired Ethernet. These are things to consider because Wi-Fi was never meant for continuous straight audio where there's no acknowledgement to resend X on, X off kind of thing. These are little details you have to remember.
Yeah. Or if there are problems, the Wi-Fi is pretty smart. It's going to resend and resend, and if there's interference, it's going to resend a lot. And for example, I'm on Wi-Fi here, but I happen to know that I am 7 feet away from the Wi-Fi hotspot, and there's no way I could have pulled the cable up through here unless I brought 100 feet. It's 100 cable feet, and it's 7 feet from here to the hotspot. So it can work, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
I'm sorry, I meant to say with the AP, the access points, remember, the bandwidth aggregation takes place if you have more than one transmit receive antenna, MIMOs, okay? So if your access point's got one antenna, holding up my pen as an antenna, and you're using that to receive and transmit your data, guess what? It's half duplex. You're not going to get the bandwidth you need or the latency that you want and control. So you look at MIMO access points that have multiple antennas for transmit and receive, and suddenly you do have a true 100 megabit or maybe 200 megabit pass through. Remember these details. In a business, it's very important.
I never realized that multiple in, multiple out, MIMO, implied just what you said, that it can be, full duplex instead of half duplex?
Well, it's a full duplex. There's a name for it. I can't think of it offhand. It's the same technology that's being used by the cellular companies. They do MIMO antennas, usually 8x8. If cell site's got an 8x8, 4x4, depending on what they're trying to do. Or what they do is called carrier aggregation, which is the same thing that's being done now in the newer 802.11n or AC. I think it's AC. But just these are things you got to look at. And if you want, like if you're going to say you have a studio, right? You got yourself a beautiful, say, 3,000 square foot video studio plus radio studio and everything you're doing in your radio station, and you're doing video and stuff, and you need a lot of wireless, and you got this access point's got one antenna on it, maybe two, and you stick it in the studio. That's great. The reality is it's not even going to be close. As soon as you get 2 or 3 users, you're done. So look at that MIMO, look at the bandwidth, look at the way it handles data aggregation, all these little details. Once you do that, then you're done. Then your workflow can have fun and you can virtualize like crazy, as we're doing here. And in previous episodes, I've been on rooftops and park benches and lakesides and using all kinds of stuff to make my connection happen. If I was making money off that particular connection, I'd be doing well. If I was a radio station, a commercial, non-commercial, public, I now have a revenue opportunity. I'm lakeside talking to people. It could be our audience, it could be whatever. I could be at a concert doing stuff. And I'm not even using ISDN or T1 to make it happen, which would ruin my ability to, for profit and loss.
So, Chris, I know I've said numerous times, and we're gonna get to it here in a meaningful way, that virtualization means different things to different people, and we're getting to the point in technology where you're beginning to be able to pick and choose the path you want to try. Now, if this kind of technology or this technique or this process makes sense to you. So after this next spot, we're going to go through some of the different scenarios that a broadcaster might choose to go through, from just dipping your foot in to putting your leg in to jumping all the way into virtualization, and where 2018 could well bring us. What conversation we're going to be having at the end of this year with regard to virtualization. So hang on, that's coming up right after this message. This, I believe, is from our friends at Omnia about the Omnia 7 audio processor.
Advances in audio cleanup are making FM sound cleaner than ever. Now, AM stations can enjoy the same clean, clear, and powerful audio processing. Meet the Omnia 7 AM, a feature-rich AM audio processor engineered to clean up source material, and the first new processor in years dedicated to AM broadcasting. While others are using old and outdated technology in their processors, the Omnia 7 AM delivers the powerful, clear, and precise Omnia signature sound that's the first choice for top stations worldwide. undo audio technology, and the amazing declipper from the Omnia 9 and Omnia 7 FM are proven to bring over-processed audio back to life. These exclusive technologies are perfect for AM broadcasting too. Omnia 7 AM's dry voice detector detects speech and applies appropriate processing for clearest possible voice quality. Next, it's a 3-stage wideband AGC with adjustable sidechain equalization and program-dependent 2 to 5 band AGCs and limiters. But the big deal for AM is the final clipper. It's an exclusive psychoacoustic controlled distortion masking clipper. It analyzes and masks distortion perceptible to the human ear, leaving only clean, clear audio. It offers the same distortion masking performance as the FM version, but redesigned for AM. Plus, the Omnia 7 AM output delivers up to 150% maximum positive peaks. Omnia 7 AM includes the full Omnia toolbox, including real-time audio analyzer, oscilloscope, and FFT displays. And every aspect of Omnia 7 AM processing is remote controllable in real time with remote audio monitoring. Omnia 7 AM, the new premium AM audio processor that's surprisingly affordable.
And thanks a lot to Omnia for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech and all of my friends at the Telos Alliance. I really appreciate their support and their leadership into the future of broadcasting, especially as it relates to virtualization. So, Chris Tobin, here's some of the scenarios I want to talk about in terms of virtualization. One of the early ways that we saw virtualization was with Enco and their automation system called the Enco 1. This is based on a server technology where, and I'm sorry if I'm shortcutting the explanation, but you've got essentially 2 server grade computers in one box, and it's got at least 2 of everything, and it's self-monitoring. And so it's built such that if a RAM stick starts having a problem, it'll flag that and move all operations over to the good server and immediately phone home. It'll notify you, it'll notify the manufacturer under their care plan that, hey, I've got a piece of RAM here that is getting bad checksums. It'll do the same for either spinning hard drives or solid state drives. It'll do this for CPUs. Hey, one of my cores is getting extra hot. You know, let's see what's wrong with it. We need a service call. We need somebody to come in here and poke around, take a look at it virtually. If you can look up, in fact, we've had somebody on the show here, maybe from Enco, back in the show notes of a previous show, where you can go look up the model of this particular piece of server hardware that is just pretty darn amazing in its ability to keep going and keep going and keep going. And in terms of virtualization, you could have this thing on site, and that's where most people would have it. But you could also have this offsite in your own data center, or put it in a data center where you can put equipment. So, Chris, that's one of the methods of virtualization where your automation system exists in a piece of hardware that is extraordinarily resilient. So that's kind of a form of virtualization. Yeah.
Yes. That's standard server. What do you call it? Continuity, business continuity planning and thinking. You can have your physical server on site, physical server off site. You can synchronize between them. There's various methods for that. I'm not going to get into it. You can use SNMP to verify its health, or there's other programs that are available for health conditions. Yes, Enco pioneered a lot of that, and it makes total sense, especially if you're a large cluster of stations that are relying on a single automation playout system for all of your stations. You want to have resilience against failure, and that's one of the ways to do it for virtualization. Also, console manufacturers now, they're all IP type stuff, also have ways of giving a similar arrangement, you know, depending on how far you go with the software defined networks that are coming out and things of that sort.
So another similar step in that regard, similar to what the Enco 1 does. And I think that their system is dependent upon a certain brand of hardware. In other words, I don't know that there are other companies making compatible hardware to that system. I think it's a very good system, but I think the hardware is tied to one manufacturer. I could be wrong on that. Another way of doing this, though, is something that plenty of IT people know about, and our friend Alex Hartman has certainly been playing with, and that is just using VMware in such a way that you can have an N+1 environment. So whether you have a stack of hardware locally, or whether you have this up in the cloud somewhere, and of course, being off-site has its own set of issues, its own set of additional connection requirements. Let me get back to the VMware, and then we'll talk about those connection requirements. So if you've got an N+1 solution, if a Blade or some other VMware instance running detects that there's a problem or a lockup, hey, this OS can't go on anymore, it has the ability to almost instantly shove all this stuff into another hypervised area, and bam, start running that OS and that app basically where the other one left off or locked up. And so you can have seamless or nearly seamless takeover in an N+1 situation. So you can have, as you said, continuity of business there with a live environment, as you'd have with a live on-air system, as you'd have with electronic hospital records, EHR, whereas you have in an operating room environment where if you have systems that these can't fail, or if they do fail, we need instant recovery while the patient's on the bed, right? So that's another type of virtualization when you start putting your systems in a system like that. But Chris, let's talk for a second about thinking about, if you put all this offsite, what connections would you need from an audio point of view back to a data center? You would have to have obviously the output of whatever you were mixing locally. Let's say you're doing a local show, whether it's 24/7 or a few shifts a day or one shift a day. You've got your local audio that gets mixed, has to go somewhere to get mixed in off-site. You also need a low delay return, so that if you're talking over music, you're hearing what you hear in your headphones locally. And by the way, this is what BBC is doing. This is, I believe, our sponsor Lavo has this availability in there. And certainly you can rig up other manufacturers' IP systems to do something very similar. Since BBC is doing, obviously they're doing this with Axia gear at the BBC, where you have a low delay local mix monitor and a low delay return, which would be a mix minus return, if you will. It would just be what's coming from the data center, whether that's automation music or callers or people that are on remote codecs, all those kind of things. They come in a low delay way and get mixed in just for the purpose of producing it for the headphones and the speakers at the local level station. Well, that's what I'm thinking of. So what else might you need besides low delay high quality audio getting there and low delay medium quality audio coming back from monitoring? And then of course you've got your program output, your final mix that's going to a transmitter site somewhere that would be high quality. Am I missing?
Well, your interconnectivity is whatever you choose. I mean, there's many ways to have bandwidth connectivity and is available. One of the things to consider is at your studio side, where you're connecting to hearing all the stuff from your remote data center, I'll call it. Make sure your power conditioning is pristine. One thing that we always overlook is power, and the utility power of mains, depending on which part of the world you're in, can sometimes be dirty. And it's not uncommon that you have a facility that has a lot of things plugged into it, and the power supplies, which are switching, most likely creating harmonics, can cause minor corruptions in the equipment. And I've had many a case where an automation computer suddenly starts going wonky and can't figure out why. And we find out that, oh, it's not plugged into the UPS filtered circuit. And it happened to be impacted by a air conditioning compressor turning on several times a day on that particular branch circuit.
Oh.
So that's the other thing to consider. As far as latency, that's all based on hardware, based on the manufacturer. There is no one particular solution there. If you're using Axia, then you know what you're expecting. If you're using Lavo, you know what to expect. If you're using Ravenna or anybody else, or the others that are out there, Wheatstone, WheatNet, you know exactly where the latencies are, and you can work with it. But the one thing to consider is always power conditioning. And that's something we've lately have forgotten to look into, because a lot of microprocessor-based equipment can be very, very finicky when that plus or minus 5 volt supply is off by a 0.5% or more, or there's a dip or anything going on. And let's not forget that, because most PCs, they're not designed for that mission critical setup.
You're right, and I'm in our discussion here, I'm kind of speaking, big picture, pie in the sky. Of course, there's a million little details, and power is no little detail, actually. I mean, I'm assuming that all this stuff works right, and you've got all this stuff done right. Power, as you point out, is very critical, and things like air conditioning compressors and elevators, things like that can really wreak havoc on those systems. So they've got to be right. Chris, thinking about maybe another virtualization model. Okay, now I can speak specifically at the BBC. They've kind of virtualized, but really what they've really done is just moved a lot of the processes that normally would be done at the local studio. They've moved it to a data center. And they haven't, in their case, they're running it on dedicated hardware. It happens to be blades, but each blade is not running a hypervisor in a virtual machine. Each blade is running an OS. It's running, in most cases, Linux. So they're running, they happen to be running Axia Studio Mix engines in Linux on a dedicated hardware blade. These are they're not very well-known hardware. They're made generally for the military, but in different countries, by the way. But these are individual blades. So they've taken what would be at the studio in standard Axia 2RU hardware boxes, whether it's an iPort, so that's multiple codecs in and out, or whether it's a Telos VX, which is a multi-line, multi-studio phone system, or whether it's a mix engine, which is mixing the things that you have, you're telling it to with faders. They've just moved all that to a data center and a backup system as well. But they haven't really virtualized per se. They just felt that they were saving money in the long run by not having to have all this equipment at all the local radio stations. They had a simplified arrangement at each station, mostly surfaces, mic pre's, headphone amps, local inputs, local outputs, speakers, and everything else, literally everything else, is in a data center somewhere. But it's the same gear that they would have had otherwise. Then they had some custom software written. For example, they didn't want to dedicate an entire Telos VX phone system for each of their local radio stations out in the countryside across England, when these stations, some may take 100 phone calls a day and some may take 3 phone calls a day. So they didn't want to dedicate a whole blade of, in this case, Telos VX to each radio station. So they had one of our partners in England write them some software that actually allocates a line and a hybrid to the station where it's needed at that moment. And the operator of the station doesn't have to worry about any of this at all. This is actually a really valid form of virtualization. You've taken by the way, they might, I don't know for sure, but they might have the equivalent of 10 Telos VXs for 38 radio stations across England. And they're able to do this because they can dynamically allocate lines and hybrids. Of course, the lines are fixed numbers, right? The public knows to dial this number to get to talk to this presenter on this radio station. But the hybrid that it gets assigned to, and the input on the console that it gets assigned to, that's dynamic, and they can assign that literally on the fly. And the operator at the radio station, all he does, he just knows that, oh yeah, here's my phone caller. It says right on his software, oh, he's right here on this fader, pots it up, and bam, that caller's there. He's not getting a caller from some other radio station, he's getting his caller. And to me, that is a real magic in virtualization. You can take a resource that is not used real often, and you can spread it efficiently among a number of facilities. How's that for an explanation?
That's an excellent explanation. And going back to earlier in the netcast where I talk about virtualization and whether or not you use it to make money, not only save money. Now the question I have is, did the BBC create or enhance their programming to offset and make revenue increases based on the savings they were able to introduce in the workflow? I mean, that's all well and great. Yes, I took everything from that facility and brought it back to a data center because I saved money. Right. But now what? I mean, what happened to the programming? Or was there programming that was lost? Or was there programming that never happened? Or you just did it because you had to show somebody on paper that we made some things happen because the annual report calls for it? I only say, I'm not saying this to be negative. I've been in many places where all they were worried about was saving money, but then when they did all the changes in virtualization in some cases, or massive server farms, I'll call them, nothing was done with the programming. And all of a sudden it was, well, we're still not making money. Okay, but we saved 30% by doing what we did. So couldn't we work on programming that gives us at least 25% increase or 15%? So it's halfway there it was like crickets in the room. So people like, no, you don't understand. I was like, okay, there's two things you have to remember in business, right? It's the cost of doing business, and then there's the return on investment. And if you've made a savings, so that's part of your return on investment. But the question is, did you increase your revenue to offset the savings so that you can have a profit at the end? And I still, to this day, when I talk to general managers, they're like, it doesn't work like that. I'm like, okay, fine. You know what? You're $21 billion in debt. I got it. Okay, fine. It doesn't make any sense. I love what the BBC did. I think it's great, and it actually opens up opportunities. But I haven't read many articles from that part of the globe talking about the new things they've done. It's like, okay.
Yeah, in the case of the BBC, they're already massively local in their programming. I mean, hours and hours and hours and hours every day of local presenters, local talk people in local stations. Now, that's for their talk stations. And I'm sorry, I don't remember what services they call this. But if you, for example, I visited BBC Radio Kent, and the studios were just full of people all the time. And the point was they were just producing the refit, as they say, the refit of a studio there took about 2 weeks. And, they have their own standards for doing things. Normally this would have taken a lot longer, but converting it into this semi-virtualized environment allows a crew of 2 or 3 engineers to show up at a studio, rip one studio out at a time. They have duplicate mirror studios, and it allows them to upgrade all this stuff in a way that they had no hope of doing before, probably because they've been saving money on not having fewer engineers. The point is that BBC said we couldn't afford to do this the way we used to do it, the way we rebuilt things 20 years ago. No, we don't have the money to do that anymore. And that's probably speaks to the issue you're talking about. So this gave them a way to stay within some kind of budget. It's still millions of dollars for all these stations, but at least from a programming point of view, and of course they're using, by and large, taxpayer dollars to do this. But they are massively, massively local. So in their case, their non-commercial case, your argument probably is not as applicable. But I can certainly see this in the commercial case. Okay, great, we're saving this money. What are we doing? Are we resting on our laurels and selling fewer ads and thereby not increasing our profit margin, or are we going to actually use this to do something good over the longer term?
Right. And I totally agree with the BBC. And you're right. When I did look up stuff about that project they did, the funny thing was I was looking for articles or comments to talk about, yes, we saved here, we did this. And then I was hoping they would say, in order to enhance what we've been doing locally. I know they do a lot of local stuff. I have several friends who are UK residents who are currently working here in the States, and I get to talk to them. And when they go back home, they tell me the stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, check this out. Makes total sense. And BBC is probably one of the few government public broadcasters in the world that still get it and get it done. And yes, maybe they were bloated at one time, and maybe they got to rein it in. I get that part, but they're definitely, the local element is what they have. I just wish they would from time to time just say, here's why we did it. So it's not just we saved money and people look at it as like, oh, you cut jobs. No. It was help enhance the programming we're doing, which people don't realize they do a lot of, which is true here in the States. There's many local regional groups that do a lot of local stuff. But anytime there's something reported about them, all it is that they're just saving money because they got rid of jobs. And it's like, no, they didn't get rid of jobs. They saved the money to do more with the local. And that's the one part that always is missing when some of these things happen. And there are those that do it just to cut staff. I will admit that.
Chris, we got to take a break. We started a bit late, but we're going to end a bit late, and we can't keep Suncast past his bedtime. So, our show this week in Radio Tech, we're kind of wrapping up the year. We're talking about what's going to happen in the year and years ahead, virtualizing radio equipment, broadcast facilities. What is this going to look like, and how are we getting started? I still feel like we're at the beginning of this, and yet some stations are already doing a lot of this. Hey, at my little stations in Mississippi, we brought on a new station last week, and we're putting another new station on the air in the next week or two. and we have I haven't even visited there myself. The work that I've had to do has all been done remotely to make connections to hook up Axio IP audio driver stuff to make automation systems work. But I got to tell you, in our case, we are enhancing in both of the stations that my little group bought. We bought 2 stations. Our programming is far more local than what those other 2 stations had been doing. In fact, one of them had been off the air for close to a year. And so we're bringing local news and local weather and breaking news and local spot sales to 2 stations that I don't think actually had never had them before, had never had local news, had rarely, if ever, had local weather, and had almost never had local spot sales. So we're bringing localism to 2 facilities, 2 FM facilities that didn't have them before. And of course, we bought them inexpensively because they hadn't been run well. They were jukeboxes. We're making them at least local jukeboxes with local information on them. So anyway, and we're doing that because thankfully that we can put everything in our own data center and run things pretty efficiently. Okay, so enough about that. Hey, it's not a perfect world, but I think we're really improving what's there. This Week in Radio Tech, the final episode of 2018 is brought to you by our friends at Lavo, L-A-W-O, Lavo.com. And when you go there, would you please use the special URL, lavo.com/TWiRT, TWiRT. First of all, it'll take you straight to their page that's full of radio products, smaller audio consoles and routing systems, the relay system, which allows you to go do live remote broadcasting easily. It's basically a radio station in a backpack, but it can also be your main studio. And it has a lot of functionality built right in. Right now, though, we're looking at the new Lavo Ruby console, introduced oh, I'm sorry, Suncast just reminded me, I said 2018. I got 2018 on the mind. Last show of 2017. And so the folks at Lavo introduced this console actually late in 2016, but they really brought it out and showed it in all its glory in 2017. So thank you very much, Suncast, for reminding me. I'm so sorry, my brain's into next year. The Ruby console is this really amazing hybrid of local control that's easy to do. I mean, this thing is basically ready to use when you pull it out of the box. It doesn't require much setup, but if you want to, you can make it sing and dance and tap dance and do all kinds of stuff just by going in under the hood. So this Lavo console, the Ruby console, has stuff, hey, if you're an engineer and you need to get this thing on the air fast, okay, it does that. If you're the kind of engineer that likes to go in under the hood and tweak and customize things and make things ready for your announcers, your staff, your talent to get done what they want to get done, to do things like auto mix, that's built in as well, but you got to go in and configure it. And so there's so much cool stuff there with the first of all, the surface, we just passed it by. Thin is in. It's a beautiful thin surface that sits on the tabletop. There we go. I mean, what a gorgeous looking console surface. Really efficient, feels good underhand, and just awesome. It's only 51 millimeters or 2 inches tall from the bottom of the cast side frames to the tops of the rotary selectors. So that's it. Slim and trim and sharp as the cutting edge. And then we scroll down some more and we see that you get this, you hook it up to a beautiful monitor, whatever monitor you like, and wow. I mean, you can customize the look of that monitor just very extensively. So you get all kinds of options for metering, clocks, warning lights, social media, HTTP web pages, video, live streaming, all kinds of control and monitoring available right there on the screen. And that is a real beauty of Ruby console. And it's done using the remote control and the virtual control tools that Lavo offers. You got to check this thing out. I mean, if you're into this kind of operation with a very slick and very customizable interface for the announcers to use, and yet at the same time, quick and easy to set up initially, well, check it out. Go to Lavo, LAWO.com/TWiRT. And please use the /TWiRT so that they know that we sent you there. Radio never looked so good. The Ruby mixing console from Lavo. Hey, you're going to be upgrading next year? Check it out. You owe it to yourself to make sure you know all the options. You can join the ranks of NPR, the CBC, the BBC, and others in getting a Ruby console and using Lavo's technology. And hey, it's all ready for AES 67 audio over IP as well. So the world is connecting that way for sure. Thanks, Lavo, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Chris, we got to go. You got any final thoughts about either virtualization for us?
My best thought would be for the tip for everyone is learn the language of your business side of the operation. Explain why investing in a $10,000 console system that's IP based would benefit your operation. If you've done your homework, do the math and say this is what we can accomplish. And I can say that I did that several times, and one time I did do it for a large news operation. Explain to the management, which would be the news director, program director, general manager, that if we invested in this particular technology, we would be able to do the following, which would be put our anchors on location during election night coverage. Our reporters could be at different places and connect in and be part of the operation very seamlessly without even using ISDN if necessary. Or if we had to do ISDN, that would be fine too. And also we could have operations from people's homes in the event of inclement weather. And that particular system that I speak about was the Axia system. And Kirk, you remember that operation that we put it in.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you for... Well, thanks for reminding us of that. And hey, I've got to say the same thing. Audio over IP, that's the foundation for getting into the world, first of convenience, remote control, remote configuration, and then eventually into virtualization, because when you virtualize, no matter what kind of virtualization you do, whether it's in the near term, the medium term, or the long term, it's going to involve IP. It's going to involve getting audio over IP. And so we as engineers need to learn how to make that work reliably so that there aren't glitches. I mean, here, look, I'm on a home connection. If you've heard some glitches on my audio, well, what can you expect? I'm on Wi-Fi. I'm on a home connection. Hey, I'm in the mountains. I'm in the Smoky Mountains. I mean, come on, it's a long way to the head end from here. But from your professional broadcast facility, you need to learn how to do this stuff. So let's learn this together. By the way, SBE, a fantastic resource for learning how to do this. In fact, I can't promise it, but I want to have Jim Leifer, the new SBE president, on as a guest here to talk about the new Member Plus program at SBE. So, hey, all that's coming up. We got to go. Thanks for holding on. Thanks for staying with us and joining us. We started a bit late today. Chris, thank you, and Happy New Year to you. Hope you have a safe one in New York City.
Thank you, Kirk, and Happy New Year to you, and a safe one in the mountains.
All right. Well, we're gonna do it right here. I'm gonna try to be better at being a Boy Scout and lighting the fire, and keeping it going as the new year starts. Suncast, Happy New Year to you too. Thanks so much for being there for us. I appreciate you virtually.
Hey, you're welcome.
All right. That's gonna do it for us. Tell your friends about This Week in Radio Tech, and we'll see you next week right here on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.